We will never unite with Zuma, who wants to kill the EFF. Whether Trump says the same thing about the two of us, we don't care. We must never be tempted to unite with the agents who want to destroy the EFF. If Zuma batla unity of black people, why did he form MK when there was EFF? There is no unity they are talking about. They are pretentious about it. Zuma is about himself and about his family. That's why he went to form that spaza show.
But former EFF Deputy President, now MK Party Secretary General Floyd Jivambu is unyielding, saying if some party leaders don't want unity with his party, what matters for them is the voters and not the leaders.
Comrades, don't worry about leaders of black political parties that say they do not want unity with MK. We are going to unite voters, leave them alone. We have already started in KwaZulu-Natal. This unity that we are asking for, we're not begging it. We are demanding unity of black people. And if leaders don't want to unite, we're going to unite the voters. Our people know what they want. Our people can see that these are charlatans.
South African National Defence Force has dismissed a report by a newspaper article that its members withdrawing from the Democratic Republic of Congo are to surrender their weapons whilst transiting through Rwanda. It says this article must be condemned in the strongest possible term as nothing but hearsay. Ridaba Tsotetse reports.
In a statement, the SANDF says that this article is not factual and appears to be aimed at creating panic and discrediting all involved. It also says that this reporting compromises the safety of the troops. And the SANDF says that the author of this story did not verify the facts with the authorities. SANDF troops are withdrawing from the DRC after an agreement was reached by SADC and the East African Community to allow peace processes to resume.
Brazilian ambassador to South Africa, Benedicto Fronenca-Filho, has praised South Africa's leadership as chair of this year's G20 summit. Speaking to Channel Africa during Africa Day celebrations in Pretoria yesterday, the ambassador acknowledged the challenges involved in chairing the global forum, but emphasized that South Africa's role goes beyond the continent, representing the interests of the global south and indeed the entire world. He highlighted that the priorities tackled at the G20 are critical not only for developing countries but for global progress as a whole.
I should thank, in the name of Brazil, what South Africa is doing, because what South Africa is trying to achieve, and we know it's a big challenge for us. Last year it was an extremely challenging exercise chairing G20 because there are so many streams of work and all of them are very important for us. But I would like to say what South Africa is doing is not doing only in the name of South Africa or only in the name of Africa, but in the name of the global South, because all the topics, all the priorities, all the streams of work are of interest for all of us. And I would even say not only the global South, but for the world as a whole.
Lastly, Ukraine says Russia sent in more than 350 attack drones overnight, the biggest number since it launched its invasion. The news come hours after U.S. President Donald Trump said Vladimir Putin had gone absolutely crazy with his weekend nighttime bombardment of Ukrainian cities. He said he was considering further sanctions on Moscow. For his part, President Volodymyr Zelensky said only a sense of total impunity allowed Russia to keep escalating its attacks. The BBC's James Waterhouse.
There are small grounds for optimism in that this is the second time Donald Trump has threatened further sanctions. But we've yet to see America impose further penalties for Moscow. The American argument has been that it would damage any chances of pausing fighting for the first time since 2014. So we've got the response from the White House, but I think it's all about the action that follows if you're Ukraine.
Recapping on your top story, South Africa's economic freedom fighter leader Julius Malema has accused the Umkhonto weSizwe party leader Jacob Zuma of being pretentious about his call for black unity. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Ntsinzi.
SABC News. the African perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Manchester United set for further financial turmoil, and the overall prize pool for the French Open sits at $64 million, marking a 5.2 increase from last year's tournament. Details coming up at 4:30.
It is a very good afternoon to you, Ghana. Good afternoon, Eritrea, Zambia, Somalia. Good afternoon to you, Botswana, Eswatini, Eritrea. Good afternoon to you, Nigeria. Good afternoon, Africa. Welcome to Africa in Business on Channel Africa. I'm Thami Ngubeni. This is where you get the African perspective. It's where we meet to look at the latest in news, sport and business. We are coming to you live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. A lot in store for you today, including the latest regarding the upcoming presidency of the African Development Bank on Thursday. That is when we will find out who of the 5 candidates will be walking away with this title. We'll also be looking at the state of sugar in Malawi, as well as a conversation with Mr. Lebohang Maile, who is the Gauteng province's MEC for Economic Development. That and a whole lot more coming up for you on Africa in Business. Here's an open invitation for you to interact with us on the various social media platforms. On YouTube, Instagram and X, you'll find us at Channel Africa 1. On Facebook, we are at Channel Africa. If there are any stories that you'd like to share, stories that you believe would be of interest to our listeners, both on the African continent and in the diaspora, do send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. A very good afternoon to you, Africa. This is Africa in Business.
Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa, the African perspective. Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
We begin here this afternoon. The African Development Bank will elect a new president this week. This is when the continent's biggest multilateral lender faces unprecedented challenges from funding cuts by the United States government. Their first order in office for one of the 5 candidates is to persuade the United States to reinstate the funding or to seek additional funds from non-regional members of the bank like China or Gulf countries like Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates. Earlier, I spoke to SABC News reporter Kaelihle Khumalo, who is currently in Abidjan, Ivory Coast.
Well, obviously, Thami, this is quite important. We know that, for example, South Africa is backing Bajabulile Swazi Shabalala. So they say she's got the acumen. She used to be the vice president of the African Development Bank. And even at the recent Just CEO Africa CEO that was recently held in Abidjan, President Cyril Ramaphosa again was on the campaign trail alongside Ms. Chabalala, really selling her candidature to the member states. So they do say that she's somebody with a know-how, but of course there are other candidates as well. We know that there's Samuel Mambo from Zambia, but also that one is backed by the SADC region. This has almost created like a rift within the bloc because you have those who are supporting a South African candidates, but also within the Zambian bloc as well. So there are other countries as well. The former finance minister in Mauritania, and also we do understand in Senegal as well. So in total, it's about 5 candidates. And we do understand that, Thami, then come the 29th of May, that's when the election will take place.
And now the biggest issue at the moment is funding of the bank. Can you take us through some of the discussions around this?
I think it's a very critical time, Thami, especially because of the geopolitical shift in so many parts of the world, the development with the return of the US President Donald Trump, and just the impacts thereof, especially with the tariffs, albeit with a 90-day pause, but creating almost this uncertainty. So just the discussions here, the self-sufficiency, that's a key words that are being used here by the African member states in terms of making sure that they mobilize their own resources, especially also as we know that aid has been cut off by Washington, D.C. So it's a very important time for Africa to mobilize its own resources, but obviously in terms of the shareholding within the member states, you know that you're predominantly big countries, the likes of Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, they tend to have quite a massive amount of shares within the bank itself, but obviously there are some non-African bank members as well. But also during the course of the day, Thami, for example, the outgoing president, Adesina, was really talking about some of their successes, but also highlighting some of the very key challenges that are still facing the continent.
So should the bank fail, Kaelihle, to persuade the United States to reinstate the funding or alternatively to raise funding elsewhere, what impact will this have on the continent's poor nations that get favorable lending rates from the bank?
That would be very devastating, Thami, especially because we know that the African Development Bank, it works very hard in terms of supporting member states, in terms of their developmental agenda. For example, Dr. Adesina was talking about his recent visit in Lesotho, in Cape Verde, and many other parts of the continent, because also, for example, they look at these 5 priorities. It's all about making sure that you power up Africa, you integrate Africa, you feed Africa, but also making sure that in that particular process, you're able to mobilize the resources and support the member states, especially because these are very untenable times. You've got climate change as one of the biggest challenges facing the world, and inevitably the African continent is really bearing the brunt of this massive issue. And we know that with Dr. Adesina, that's been a very critical issue in terms of really just propelling the developmental agenda of the continent.
And what other activities are planned for this week?
Well, obviously, it's going to be a long haul. Today, it was just a meet, a breakfast with the president of the bank, Adesina, talking about the priorities in Africa, repositioning Africa, but obviously quite a number of side events. We know that during the course of the day, there'll be an issue. For example, looking at the debt issue in Zimbabwe, we expect the finance minister of Zimbabwe to attend that particular session to look at how Harare is dealing with this particular issue, because as much as it is a problem in Zimbabwe, but quite a number of countries in the global south, they are battling with this issue of debt sustainability. But obviously quite a very jam-packed program in terms of so many other issues as well, in terms of the priorities of the continent, especially since we are right in West Africa, Thami. You know that from time to time, this is a region that is facing a number of issues when it comes to instability, you know, with the coups, but obviously what is key is that you need to get stability right in the country so that development can flourish.
That was SABC News reporter Kaelihle Khumalo, who is currently in Abidjan, the Ivory Coast. Thursday is indeed the day. Will it be Amadou Hot from Senegal, Samuel Munzele Maimbo from Zambia, Sidi Oldtar from Mauritania, Abbas Mamat Toli from Chad, or will it be Swazi Shabalala from South Africa? All that will be revealed come Thursday. It's gone exactly 16 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African Time.
Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
We take you now to Malawi, where the increasingly short supply of sugar on the market has forced consumers to be subjected to what economists say are exploitative prices. The price of a 1 kilogram packet of sugar has at the moment surged to $3.5, which is double the recommended government price. Surveys show that sugar vendors are selling the commodity at exorbitant prices, and this is due to a serious shortage and an alleged hoarding by some distributors. George Mhango reports from Blantyre.
With the short supply, consumers buy a packet of sugar at $3.05 from Mayor traders, as opposed to the recommended government set price of $1.77. In major chain stores, retail and wholesale shops, long queues are the order of the day, just in anticipation that the product would be available. Traders in locations are the ones who worsen the situation, leading to a rise in prices, making sugar less affordable for many Malawians. One of the consumers, Jonathan Jere, is bitter with the situation.
There are a lot of things which need sugar. So if there's no sugar, it means there's a bit of problem, especially to those babies, because they are used to eat something that is sugar. So if there is no sugar, you find that maybe they might not be eating what they have been eating. And the stress of moving around shops seeking for sugar is another disturbing thing. And something that sometimes makes you a bit to be angry because you can't find whatever you want. So the scarcity of sugar generally, it is a worrisome.
Ilovo Sugar Malawi, a subsidiary of Ilovo Sugar Group Limited, and Salima Sugar, which is owned by the Malawi government, are facing hard times to flood the market with the product. The companies were last month forced to hike the price due to what they said was the cost of inflation across the supply chain, rising costs of essential raw materials, electricity, water, and goods and services required for sugar production. But one of the producing companies, Salima Sugar, expects to produce 22,000 metric tons this year to help ease the shortage, according to its chief executive officer, Wester Kosam.
The scarcity of sugar on our part cannot be attributed to Salima Sugar. Salima Sugar is not a big company that can satisfy the whole market, but it's trying to supplement what has already been on the market. There's that kind of misconception where people say maybe there are companies who are holding sugar. We give the sugar to our distributors. But I should confess here that there are some distributors who are holding the sugar, and it's true.
The rising cost of living, including sugar, has fueled calls for government's intervention to address the issue. This is why the Competitions and Fair Trading Commission, CFTC, which is a government-owned institution, has launched investigations against traders into exploitative pricing. CFTC has since warned of stiff penalties. Innocent Helema is the spokesperson of CFTC.
Be informed that this week and of course next week, CFTC is collecting data on prices of basic household goods. This is actually aimed at establishing any excessive pricing conducts and take such traders to book. It is actually a violation of the Competition and Fair Trading Act to increase prices unreasonably, such as exploitative or excessive pricing.
Minister of Trade and Industry Vitumbiko Mumba recently conducted inspections in warehouses of some megastores where he found that some were hoarding the product. Economists say Malawi's sugar market is projected to experience mixed growth patterns in the coming years, with a peak of 18.94% in 2028 and a projected growth rate of 17.21% by 2027. George Muhango, Channel Africa News, Blantyre.
Annika Longi sur Channel Africa.
Nous allons danser au son de Haya, que je dédicace à vous tous, chers auditeurs, qui êtes en train de suivre cette émission Mix Vibration. N'oubliez pas, vous pouvez nous suivre à partir de l'application SABC+. Vous choisissez Channel Africa pour suivre l'émission en direct. Nous allons danser au son de Haya.
Annika Longi, tous les dimanches sur Mix Vibration.
From markets to innovation, Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni covers it all. With Africa's future in focus, Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 22 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African Time. Now, Kenya's financial sector regulators are looking into a proposal that will require fund managers investment banks as well as stockbrokers to make full disclosures of their clients whose funds are invested in corporate bonds. Currently, fund managers pull together resources from several clients and make investments in corporate bonds as single investments and usually in their own name without disclosing the identities of the investors. The regulators say this would ensure that bondholders of collapsed or defaulting issuers receive maximum compensation. For more on this, we joined on the line by Dr. Francis Sang, a Kenya-based economist. Doctor, a very good afternoon to you. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Very good afternoon to you too, Thami. Thank you.
Perhaps let's start with an understanding as to why Kenya's financial sector regulators see the need to table this proposal requiring fund managers, stockbrokers, investment banks, etc., to make full disclosures of their clients whose funds they have invested in corporate bonds.
Okay, to understand that, it's a good move. And really the genesis of the move is because of iniquity when it comes to distribution of compensation when there is a failure by a player in the capital market sector. This happens because there are types of compensation in case a lender or a financial institution defaults, paying people who have lended money into an institution or who have deposits into an institution. The first one, there is banks. When banks default, it's usually 500,000 Kenyan shillings, which is around $3,900. For bonds, for fund managers, like in this case, the particular one you're talking about, is 200,000 shillings per lender, irrespective of the amount that you deposited with the account. That is the compensation you're going to get. Let's say if a bank collapses with your deposit. Now, the genesis of disclosing the names is because of the nature of the investment vehicles being used by individuals. For example, what we call fund managers in Kenya, they offer products that investments pool funds through a fund manager. That means I come, me, you, other people, we give our money through a fund manager, and the fund manager invests this money as a vehicle. So what happens? Financial institutions see this fund manager as one person, and the deposit amount is standard, same as for any other individual. While this fund manager has come in, it's a vehicle incorporating many people who've invested through the fund manager. So iniquity arises when the distribution is done, because the fund manager does not disclose the other members, invests through what we call nominee accounts. So when compensation is done, the fund manager will be given 200,000 Kenyan shillings, same as a different individual who invested, while the fund manager had more money by virtue of consolidating funds from different sectors. So this is why the regulators are coming in to discuss on how to find equity by these people being disclosed, the people behind, you lift the veil behind the investment vehicle, so that they can find a formula to compensate everyone equitably in the market. It's just about equity.
And Dr. Francis Sang, we'll continue with our conversation in just a moment. And I wonder what impact this is going to have on issues of anonymity. For example, we spoke about the fact that fund managers are the ones that are in the forefront, and they then pool the resources from the different clients and into the corporate bonds and put it as a single investment. Maybe if you could, Dr. Francis, talk to us about the benefits of anonymity and why this has been a practice.
Okay, the benefit of anonymity, first and foremost, is data protection. In that you protect the data of the people, the details of the people who are investing, because most investors would like their data to be there in the public. And second of all, it was easier. It was easy to invest through such a means where you leave the burden of client administration to the fund manager, and the fund manager invests as one. So how this helped is that the fund manager had bigger muscle and could negotiate better investment returns. for instead of people. Then also it was the economies of scale, because you are many people going through one person who has the resources. It was cheaper in terms of the charges that the fund manager, who is an investment expert, could charge these people. Yes.
When it comes to especially high net worth individuals and institutional investors, are they open to such disclosures, and how is this going to impact them?
Yes, they are open to such disclosures. Now, their details will be with the authority, but I don't think it will have a high impact because we have laws protecting data and how data is handled. So these rules have to be adhered to, and in any way, fund managers usually disclose the details of their clients to the regulator on an annual basis. This is especially during things like audit. The regulator has a way to know everyone, because the fund manager has to disclose the data of the members of the scheme, the details like the geographical location, but it is through a way that the data does not leak to the public. It's only in line with the regulations, also to protect the capital markets from other issues other than only deposit. Yes.
And what about the challenges of perceived, privacy invasions or the administrative burdens that will come from these change in regulations? Are those likely to discourage investment in corporate bonds?
I believe they may, because what will happen in this case, complexities shall arise, because when fund managers invest, they invest in a portfolio of assets, not only corporate bonds. And the money they receive from individuals, they receive it over a period of time. So complexity will arise to which clients and to which monies will you allocate to this corporate bond? Or will you use a simple formula where you prorate to the number of clients and the value per client, and then you divide it to this corporate bond? So such issues will arise because the fund managers who handle clients, more than 100,000 clients, so distributing one asset, and there are like 3-4 portfolios of assets, it will create a complexity in terms of compensation, because for others you would rather, depending on the size of the fund and the impact of the loss, you would rather the fund absorbs that loss and gets just one compensation amount as a fund and distributes it among the members. It's easy administratively, but profitably, it's a loss. When fund managers will declare the people by listing that who've invested, the fund can gain more than one deposit insurance compensation. That will challenge that may arise.
I guess moving forward,
yes.
Dr. Sang, it might be easier to implement moving forward after the structures have been put in place. But retrospectively, will this rule and this change of regulation apply retrospectively? Because for me, it's almost like trying to unscramble an egg.
I fully agree. It's next to possible to apply it retrospectively. Maybe moving forward, because these are just the first discussions between the regulators. They need to sit down and come up with a plan, look at the complexities, also look at the uniqueness of these investment vehicles in terms of fund managers, stockbrokers, investment banks. Look at the complexities and how this will be done. Maybe each industry to come with its formula, and then the formula to be applied to be an equitable formula. But it's not for now. I don't think in this coming year, or even maybe towards the end of next year.
And I think that's important to note that it's still in proposal phase. So a
Yes.
lot of room there for regulations and input as to what the best way forward would be, should this end up being the regulation that is adjusted. Dr. Francis Sang, we thank you for your insight and your input this afternoon.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir. That's Dr. Francis Sang, a Kenya economist, who takes us to exactly 4:32 Central African time as we head over to the economics desk, where Buntle Hedbush is standing by with your latest financial indicators.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Thami. Now for our final look at the indicators this afternoon. $1 is trading at 17 Rand 80 in South Africa. In Botswana, it's trading at 13 Pula 30. In Namibia, it's trading at 17 Namibian dollars 80. The Zambian kwacha is trading at 27 kwacha 46 to the US dollar. In Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 227. In Ethiopia, it's at 135 birr 338. In Uganda, it's trading at 3,000 shilling 630. In Tanzania, at 2,000 shilling 697. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 589. In Egypt, the dollar is trading at 49 Egyptian pound 87. In Tunisia, it's trading at 2 dinar 97. In Algeria, it's at 132 dinar 04. In Morocco, it will cost you 9 dirham 04. In Angola, the dollar is trading at 912 kwanza, while the Congolese franc is trading at 2,850 to the US dollar. Taking a look at the commodities now, gold is trading at $3,339 this afternoon, and platinum at $1,085 per ounce, while Brent crude oil is at $64.64 a barrel. And those are your financial indicators this afternoon. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Buntle Hedbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
And for the latest from the business of sport, here is Musibudi Makura.
Thank you, Thami. We'll start here. So Manchester United's decline on and off the field has been laid bare for a number of years, but was placed in even sharper focus with their defeat to Tottenham Hotspur in the Europa League final just last week. So at football finance expert Kieran Maguire noted, the defeat came despite United having heavier revenue than rather higher revenue than Tottenham Hotspur, and also spending 64% more on wages for the more expensively acquired squads of players. Now, Tottenham Hotspur also beat United twice in the Premier League this season and in the Domestic League Cup. Beyond the loss of sporting opportunities as well as reputational prestige, the club owned by the Adlazer family from the USA as well as British billionaire industrialist Sir Jim Ratcliffe has short-term as well as long-term financial hits ahead. So no Champions League play next season is an instant loss of at least $90 million and approaching $169 million, or a run deep into the knockout stages. United also misses out on a $4.5 million that Tottenham Hotspur will get from UEFA for playing the Super Cup against the Champions League title holder, either Inter Milan or Paris Saint-Germain, in a game to be played on the 13th of August in Italy. The winner will also get a bonus of $1.1 million. So while United is still one of Europe's highest earning clubs, UEFA's annual research shows its advantage is in decline, even though revenue was a club record. The revenue was a club record of $887 million just last year. A UEFA chart also showed that over 5 years, from 2019 to 2024, pre-COVID-19 through to the post-pandemic recovery in the football industry, United's revenue grew at a slower rate, and that all of its biggest English rivals except Chelsea. Now revenue now risks dropping, and another income cut is coming after finishing in 6th 16th position on the log standings this season. The 3 previous years totaled losses of about $316 million for Manchester United. Let's hear from Jim Ratcliffe as he paints a grim picture of the financial status of Man United.
Manchester United has lost money for the last 7 years, and it's something like in the last 4 years alone, it's lost 330 million pounds.
It's horrific.
That's a third of £1 billion in the last 4 years. During that period of time, it's been recruiting lots of new people, on top of a workforce which was already enormous. So, we finished up with 1,150 people. We've increased the cost base of running. So if you look at a couple of really simple numbers, in the last 7 years, since 2016, we increased the cost of running the club.
Now, Ratcliffe also made the ruthless decision to cut free staff lunches in an attempt to slash spending costs at Man United in August of last year. He further explains why the club needs a new financial structure.
Money that we're spending at Manchester United, it's not my money, it's the fans' money. Should I be spending the fans' money on a free lunch, or should I be spending the fans' money on a new player who might win some silverware? That's how I look at it. And you may say, well, that's a bit...
Can we not do both?
I think the answer to that is yes, we can, but we cannot do that today. We've got to put the house in order, in other words, put it on a sound financial footing. So in the future, we can maybe take some more generous decisions. But before you can get the house in order, you have to put the management team in place, because otherwise you start making the wrong decisions about what and who.
On to this now. Roland Garros has released its prize money breakdown for the 2025 edition of the clay court major that is currently underway in Paris, France. The total prize money for this year's tournament is $64 million, up by 5.21% just from last year. There will be a prize money increase in every round of this year's competition. So the men's as well as the women's singles champion will walk away with $2.88 million. The prize money for the main draw, by the way, is up 6.37% compared to that of 2024. So when you look at the champion, they'll walk away with $2.88 million. The finalist will walk away with $1.44 million, while the semi-finalists $784,000 and the quarterfinalists will earn a cool $500,000. Meanwhile, Rafael Nadal played at Roland Garros for the very last time just last year, and 20 appearances at the tournament. Nadal hoisted the trophy a record 14 times, en route to also earning $25 million. That accounts for roughly 18% of his career earnings of $138.7 million, second all-time behind Novak Djokovic, who lies at $181.6 million. In fact, the prize money that Nadal has won at Roland Garros alone ranks 21st on the all-time earnings list among men's tennis players across all tournaments. That's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. There'll be more sporting updates tomorrow morning on Africa Rise and Shine. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
Now, the 2025 Sustainable Infrastructure Development Symposium officially kicked off in Cape Town, South Africa today. The event has drawn together key stakeholders, experts as well as policymakers who are focused on accelerating vital infrastructure projects across South Africa. President Cyril Ramaphosa emphasized that meaningful investment in infrastructure could be a major driver for economic growth. Such investments are crucial for reaching the National Development Plan's targets, including a 5.5% annual economic growth rate, reducing unemployment to 6%, and increasing gross fixed capital formation to 30% of GDP. To discuss what this means for Gauteng province. We're joined by the MEC for Economic Development, Mr. Lebohang Maile. Good to have you with us, MEC. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon.
Let's start first with an understanding of how Gauteng is aligning its infrastructure development plans with the national goals outlined at SITSA 2025 and the broader national development plan.
Well, firstly, as you know, infrastructure is a driver of economic growth, and Gauteng is an economic hub of the province. And if we want to grow the economy, it means we must definitely start in Gauteng and grow the Gauteng economy. So our alignment with the national priorities is inherent and it's given. So it is important that we are here and we are able to understand what is it that the national government wants to do, and how do we then ensure that some of the projects that we have, we definitely align them to national. But you'll also appreciate that being a province, there are issues, what I'll call macro issues, that are beyond us. And if we were to grow, we will need at the policy level, at the program level, but also even in terms of the fiscal policy and allocation of money. So we'll definitely need a national government to be appreciative of the challenges that we find ourselves in. Yeah.
Could you highlight for us some of the specific projects or the specific initiatives in Gauteng that you are prioritizing in order to boost economic growth as well as job creation through sustainable infrastructure, bearing in mind, obviously, the caveat that you've mentioned that the resources need to be there and whatever transformations in policy to allow you to be able to fulfill this mandate?
Well, there's both social and economic infrastructure. We have set aside resources for social infrastructure already, like schools, hospitals, clinics, etc. But we also want to expand our road networks in the province, because the number of vehicles is growing by the day, by the year, and therefore we need to have sufficient infrastructure to be able to move goods and people. That's why there's plans to have what we call the Gauteng Freeway Improvement Scheme, Phase 2 and Phase 3. Phase 1 is what is popularly known as e-tolls, and then there's going to be Phase 2 and Phase 3 that has already been in the pipeline. We are planning to expand our rail network, especially Gautrain, to be able to ensure that people are moving conveniently within the province. They can connect easily with the airport. They can move from one city to the next. We've got plans working with Limpopo to have a railway to that part of the country. There's other private sector investments, not just government. For instance, on the freight and logistics and other infrastructure development. So we're not looking only at the projects that the government is investing. Through our investment conference, we're able to coordinate that and work with the private sector. Hence, we had pledges of about 312 billion towards the Gauteng economy, and we think that's very important and significant. Hence, we are coordinating to convert those into actual projects. But we also have our special economic zones that are already running and that are being expanded as well. So those are some of the projects.
And how are you going to ensure that you have public participation and public buy-ins? And this I ask in the backdrop of your Phase 1, which you highlighted, of the Gauteng Freeway Improvement Scheme, how the e-tolls were not successful and ultimately had to be scrapped.
Yeah, remember, the citizens were not necessarily opposed to paying, because they do pay for what the toll roads and all that. They were just opposed on the mechanism that is being used, which is in electronic, meaning you can take money from their accounts once they've signed up and all that. So we definitely have to consult, and we will be consulting. And if people say they don't want an electronic system, we can't implement it. So we will definitely consult. But the user pay principle remains because we will not be able to afford infrastructure if the user pay principle does not apply.
And as we wrap up, MEC, the G20 summit in Gauteng is looking like it has a couple of challenges. There have been growing complaints and public complaints about the state of dilapidated infrastructure in the province. How are you as Gauteng preparing to address these challenges ahead of the G20 summit to ensure that the province is ready to host a conference of this nature and international events of this nature?
Well, we were the first to admit that there are challenges, and if we want to host a successful summit, we have to get our acts together and we have to coordinate better with municipalities, because there are functions that cut across the different spheres of government, and that work has started. And when the Premier delivered the State of the Province address, he identified what he called state problems in Gauteng, including the issues of crime, potholes, robots, energy, and all that. Next week, we are retabling our budget on Tuesday. We will be allocating resources towards those areas which were identified as the problems that we are facing as a province.
MEC for Economic Development in Gauteng, Mr. Lebohang Maele, we thank you very much for your time this afternoon, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. He takes us to exactly 4:48.
Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
Now, the universal health coverage workers in Kenya have been on strike for the last 95 days. This is due to the government's failure to prioritize and address long-standing issues such as harmonization of salary in line with the Salaries and Remuneration Commission's guidelines and the payment of gratuity, among other things. According to the Health Sector Caucus, comprising of health sector unions and associations, the Ministry of Health and county governments have continued to exploit 97 Global Fund staff who have worked for 11 months without pay. For more on this developing story, we're joined on the line by Peterson Wachira, who is the Secretary General of the Kenya Union of Clinical Officers. Thank you very much for your time and welcome to Africa in Business. Could you first begin by telling us what the latest is with regards to this dispute and what lies at the core of it? Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be able to shed light on the issue of the universal health coverage staff. So the universal health coverage staff is a mix of cadres. Actually, all the cadres in the health sector that were employed in 2020 when Kenya was rolling out and piloting universal health coverage. And by then, because Kenya has a system of government where the policy happens at the national level, but then we have county governments that deals with implementation. But the county governments did not have the requisite capacity in terms of the human resources, nor the financial muscle to be able to hire additional health workers. And so the national government decided to hire on behalf of the counties, but then only hired on contracts, and they are paid less than half of what their counterparts who are on permanent and pensionable are paid. So now it has been 5 years. They had been promised that they were given a contract of 3 years. They were told within these 3 years, we are going to harmonize your salary with the others and also give you a permanent and pensionable contract. But that has not happened. So we have had
There was a meeting, Mr. Wachira, with unions and the Department of Health. What came out of those meetings? What transpired? Are there any plans to avert this situation?
The meeting that was there, we didn't exactly agree. because they wanted to harmonize their pay in the year 2026 July. And for us, we were saying it has to be done as soon as possible because it is discrimination this July 2025. And so we didn't agree. And that is why the UHC have continued on strike. And they are going to parliament because this is the budgetary season. So we are looking at the parliament so that they can budget for the necessary monies to ensure that these people are actually confirmed. And the good thing is that parliamentarians are responding, the responsible committees are responding, and we are hopeful that with the continued push, we are actually going to get the necessary budget to be able to confirm them, but also to pay their gratuity.
And so what is the next plan of action then by the health unions and the associations?
So other than continuing with the demonstrations, like tomorrow we are having a mega demonstration in Nairobi, but as all the unions, we have come together under the Health Union Caucuses, which I chair, and we have informed the government that if in July, if by the time they are reading the budget for the universal health coverage staff is not going to be there, then all the unions, all the health workers are going to go on strike to ensure that that is taken care of.
Demonstrations, yes, you've highlighted. Are health services still being given to patients and citizens even in the midst of these demonstrations?
Now, at the primary healthcare level, where these 8,551 health workers work, because they are the ones who work in the lowest levels, that is level 2, which is a dispensary, and also level 3, which is a health center. Basically, most of them are now closed and services are not being offered. People are having to resort to the private sector, where maybe they have to pay out of pocket, even if they have the social health insurance. And it's not a good thing, but the government has driven us there.
And what has been the reaction from the citizens? Because clearly this is an infringement of their right to decent health care.
The citizens are angry. They are not happy. They are complaining. But so are the workers, because while the infringement on the rights to health to the Kenyans has happened, which is not our will, and actually it's the government that is responsible to ensure they get their health. Also, the workers, they have their rights to fair labor practices, and also against discrimination, because they are being discriminated. And so it's really a balance of rights, and the government is really failing on this.
Indeed, that phrase, a balance of rights, is exactly what it is. And that's why I'd like to find out how the workers have been faring, especially those that haven't been paid in close to a year. How have they been making ends meet?
It is a very difficult and dire situation. Last year, for example, not last year, actually last year in April, we lost one of the clinic officers who committed suicide and even killed her own child because of depression. And we have many other cases of those who have died because they had conditions and they could no longer afford either insurance or to pay the hospitals. We have currently lost more than 45 of them since they started working. A good number of them, they have been diagnosed with mental health related conditions. So it is really a dire situation. Sometimes you really don't understand what the government thinks in terms of looking at the welfare of these workers.
Is legal action an option for you?
Legal action is a sure option that would actually yield results. But now the problem that we are getting with the legal action is that the legal action takes quite some time. It may take up to 2 years for us to be able to get a judgment. And the problem is in those 2 years, their contract comes to an end in April next year. So that is why the legal action, though it is foolproof and we know that they are going to win, but then the time duration that is going to take is not going to favor these workers. And that is why we have resorted to the streets and the strikes.
Mr. Peterson Wachira, we thank you very much for putting all of that into context for us this afternoon. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
That's,
you.
that's Mr. Peterson Wachira. He's the Secretary General of the Kenya Union of Clinical Officers. He takes us to exactly 4 minutes to 5 p.m. Central African Time. Bonjour, Jolie Joël.
Bonjour Thami, bonjour à tous les auditeurs de Channel Africa et particulièrement de Vue d'Afrique. Alors, je vous parle des grands titres d'aujourd'hui. On parlera de la RDC où plusieurs sources confirment la présence de l'ancien président Joseph Kabila